This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Ayin Zayin. Today's shir should be a special schos for Shem Rav Chaim Yitzchak Moshe ben Esther Rezel. He should have a complete recovery. Of course, all other Chaim Chaim Yitzchak ben Malki Demi ben Nikir Ben Ben Vegam Micheli Sipar Nasel Hili Uva Chaim Ben Sarah Ben Ben Vegam Shalom Simon Ezel Zarbas Kananda the Basim Chaisar Yisrael Memindel Yed the Parents Shavalei Shalom Bas Nami Shaviv Shulchan of Aldev Nitri Shalom Ben Tila Daniel Ben Khan Rezel Mekhay Bas Min Li Baruch Tav Yamusa Besoyshar Choli Yisrael. Okay, Daf Ayin Zayin. Shabbos is Daf. We pick it up on the bottom of I involve Amid Beis the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Chamisha Dvarim, there are 5 items Ba'im B'Toma. Today is going to be all about bringing Karbanos B'Toma. There are 5 different items you're allowed to bring in the Beis HaMikdash when they are Tamei. V'Ein Necholim B'Toma, but you can't eat them in their state of Toma. Ha'aymer, the carbon aymer, the shtei alechem aponim is number 3. Zivchei shalmei tzibur. Let's remember that word tzibur, the carbonis of the shalm of the tzibur, u'seiri reish chaydesh, and the seir of reish chaydesh. 5 carbonis. Ha-pesach, and this is obviously what this is doing over here, sheba b'toma, like we know. Nechol b'toma, can even be eaten b'toma. Why? We've seen this concept already. The whole purpose, the carbon pesach, right, is not kapara. The whole purpose of the carbon pesach is le'achila, and therefore, if you bring, in the case of toma hutra b'tzibur, we'll see. You shouldn't say the word hutra yet. We'll have to see. That's going to be today's daf. But in the case of toma hutra b'tzibur, when roiv of klai all is tamid, you can bring the carbon pesach. You can even eat it in a state of toma. Says the Gemara chamish al-mutemai. Anytime you have a number, that means it's coming to exclude something. Lamute chagigas chamisha, also it's coming to exclude the chagiga of the 15th. Let's remind ourselves, there's 2 chagigas, 2 shlamim. It's the shlamim and Erev Pesach, very unique, which allows you to get filled up to eat the carbon pesach v'saiva. And then there's the carbon pesach of the shlamim of the 15th, which is the regular shlamim of every one of the shalosh regalim. I would have thought, given the carbon sibanu, since it's the carbon sibar, ukvile mayed, and there's a special time for it, therefore titchi toma, therefore it should push off toma, kamash malan, that no, kivan de is leita shlumim, when kol shiva, the entire Pesach, loidachia Shabbos is not going to push off Shabbos. Umid Shabbos loidachia, loidachia toma. So toma and Shabbos we're starting to see go hand in hand, and therefore since it doesn't push off Shabbos, why not actually bring the rest of Yontif? It doesn't push off toma, so the Mishnah is coming to exclude the shlamim of the rest of Pesach. V'nisni nami siri harigalim. Why don't we say also the seirim of the regalim, which is a different carbon tzibur that is brought on Yontif? Let's see what this is. Says the Gemara, Hatanile, we did. Zivchei shalmei tzibur. What do you mean? What is the case of a shlamim of the carbon tzibur that is the shlamim of the seir that's brought on Yontif? Says the Gemara, Yachi, 1 second, seir rosh chodesh nami. So that should be the same thing. Meaning, once we're saying that something means something else, the seir regalim should refer to both of them. Why did it list rosh chodesh separately? It says the Gemara, Yachi, seir rosh chodesh nami loy nisni, should not have listed it. It's also it's a carbon of the shlamim of the tzibur. So why do I have to list rosh chodesh separately? Says the Gemara, Amri, as when we move along to Ayin Zayin Amen Aleph, Amri Seiri Roshei Chadashim Etzrichle. We needed to say this case. Why do we need to say this case? Says the Gemara. Because I would have thought the Holy Kasabu might. It doesn't say Moyed with regard to Rosh Chodesh. Kamash Malan. The Chodesh is that what? The Rosh Chodesh Ikri Mayid. The Rosh Chodesh is called a Mayid, and therefore its carbon will also be Daicha when the people are in the state of Tama. How do I know that? Kedabaye Damer Abaye, 4 lines on the top. Tammuz Daishata on that year was what? Mila they made it into a full month, they made it into 30 days. Techsev, and they learned it from a pasuk, and this is the integral ingredient. Karu alai Mayid. Call it a Mayid Lishbar Bachure, to destroy my youth. We see that's referencing Rosh Chodesh, and it's called Mayid, and therefore it says Abaye. That's what we learn out. That the carbon of Rosh Chodesh, the Chiddush is it's Daicha because it's called a Mayid. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Lemeimer the Kulam Mayid also. We're learning out everything from Mayid. Minani Mili. How do we know that? The Tana Rabbana, we learned in a Brayso. By Dabra Moshe, it's Mayid Hashem. Ma Talmud Loimar. Why did the pasuk have to say that? Vishalei Lamadnu Ela L'Tamid. Pesach. We only learned that the carbon tam in Pesach. Shenemar b'hu b'moy adoi. B'moy adoi. When the pasuk said b'moy adoi, I feel b'Shabbos. I would think the carbon Pesach and tamid you'd bring even on Shabbos. B'moy adoi, I feel b'tama. You even bring in a state of tama. Shar carbona sibur minayin. So how do we know? We only know the tamid and the Pesach. How do we know all other carbona sibur can even also be brought b'tama? Like we just learned zivchei shalmei sibur. Shenemar, the pasuk says elu tasu Hashem b'moy adichem. Very good. And now Minayin the rabbis. So far we learned Tamid, we learned Pesach, and we learned what? We learned the carbon shlamim of the tzibur. Minayin the rabbis oimer. How do we know the carbon oimer could also be brought betoma? V'ikriv imay shtei alechem. You bring with it the shtei alechem. V'ikriv imam tamal oimer. It should have said with them. And therefore, from there we learn out that the pasuk is making one moed from all of them, meaning both of the carbon omer and the shtei alechem. They both are considered one carbon. One moed, and therefore, once we know that one is going to be deicha yamtif toma, the other one will be deicha toma as well. Says Gemara b'cholani lamli. Okay, great. Why do we need each and every one? Just say one, and we'll learn out the rest. Says the Gemara, because each one has a unique element. Shrichi, Tikas Rachmana Tamid. If it just said the carbon Tamid, I would have thought, what? Tamid, what's special about the Tamid? Shkein Tadav Kolol. We've seen this. It's every single day, and it's a kolol, it's a oil, it's completely burnt up. Avol Pesach Loi. Carbon Pesach does not have the unique quality. Kamashlan, we had to say Pesach. Tikas Rachmana Pesach, what would I have thought? We saw this already. Pesach is what? It's very chamer. That what? We get one can get kares if he doesn't bring the carbon Pesach. Avol tamid einish kares. Him like a mashlan. Because rachmana hani tarti. What? Pesach and tamid. What's unique about them? I would have thought ani who? Yesh ben sad chamer. What's a sad chamer? Tamid. Tadav kol. Pesach shoyne kares. Each one has something stringent about it. The tamid is completely burnt up and it's brought every day. The carbon Pesach is einish kares. Avol shar carbon siver. Emalai do not have that stringency. Therefore, because Rachmana, Elu Tazu Lashem B'Moyadechem. Because Rachmana, Elu Tazu Lashem B'Moyadechem. Have a minishar Karban Sibur, Haba on the Chaber. All other Karban Sibur which are bought as a kapara. Aval Oimer, when it comes to the carbon Oimer on Shvuz, Shtei Alechem, they ain't bought in the kaper. They're not brought as a kapara. They're brought as what? To permit the new grain. Elo Lahatir. They're brought only to come to permit something. Ba'alma, the new grain. Therefore, I would have thought that what? It does not come. It does not Teicha B'Tama. K'mash Blam, we had to say Shtei Alechem and the carbon Oimer. Because of Oimer Shtei Alechem, the Chudai, just those two, have a minad. Everything we just said, we can flip it around. Oimer Shtei Alechem, Da'alima, they're very chamer. Why are they very strong? The Bain Lahatir, they come to remit something. Aval Lahadach, but everything else, law, it's not coming to remit something. Kamash Malan, and that is the reason why we had to write in the Mishnah all 5 different cases, and that is the first part of everything is these 5 cases which are going to be Daicha, Beitama, one more time, the Oimer, the Shtei Alechem, the Lechem Aponim, Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur, and this Irei Roshei Chadashim. So far we learned today, number 1, is that Rosh Chodesh is called a Mayid, the Shalmei Tzibur is called a Mayid. Those are the 2 Karbanos that are Daicha because it says Mayid, V'Mayadechem, as well as the Shtei Alechem, the Lechem Aponim is learned out from there, and each one has a unique element, not allowing to learn from something else. Says the Gemara, Sav Ruah. Now we're going to have I don't want to say an interesting Gemara, but now we're going to have we're going to make two ideas. I don't know how to call it. 2 things that the Mishnah has to agree to, and based off of that, we're going to try to figure out who is the Tana of the Mishnah. Let's see, and hopefully it'll become clear. Savrua, they thought, people in Beis Medrash said as follows: Tikule alma toma dechia hi betzibur. That toma is pushed off in the tzibur, ubai tzitz laratzes, and needs the tzitz to permit. Again, there's toma hodra b'tzibur, toma dechuya b'tzibur. What is the difference? If you want to look at Rashi Divrei Hamaskel, dechuya speaks out that the difference is going to be that either way you're allowed to bring the carbon. Avagav da'achshei rachmana lemeisi betoma lav heter gomeru. Toma dechuya pushes it off. It's not just mutter. And therefore, what's the difference? A few differences, but one of them says Rashi. So the first one, this is going to be what we really need to know for today, is that you need the tzitz to give you the kapara. Meaning, it's almost like you did the wrong thing. You were supposed to do it because Toma pushes off, and therefore you're allowed to bring these karbanos. But you now need the tzitz of the kohen gadol, the bread plate, to come and give you a kapara for bringing it Toma. But if it would be Toma hotra b'tzibur, you wouldn't need the tzitz at all. Why would you need the tzitz? Because it's mutter gomer, and therefore you would not need the tzitz. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. The leka. Why are we saying again? Why? The leka tana the sham say tama hotra b'tzibur. There's no one that holds tama hotra b'tzibur. Ella, only whom? Rav Yehuda. only the opinion of Rav Yehuda. The Tani learned in a brisa, meaning we're going to prove that it's Rav Yehuda Adas Yachid. In a moment in the brisa, it's going to be versus Rav Shimon, and Taisus comes along and proves that everyone else holds like Rav Shimon. So that's just how we're going to assume that when it says Tuma Hotra B'Tzibur is the opinion of everyone against Rabbi Yehuda. The Tani we learned in a brisa. The tzitz of the Kohen Gadol. Bein sheyesh la mitzchay, bein she'ina la mitzchay, meratze divrei Rav Shimon. It works according to Rav Shimon. Meaning, the point is that the tzitz is the integral ingredient. Not that he wears it per se, that the tzitz is around. Whether he's going to wear it or not, that's a different discussion, and maybe that's to do with carbon sibur, carbon yachid. But the point is, says Rav Shimon, the tzitz is that which is coming to permit, which is our shita of what tama, the chuya b'tzibur. Rav Yehuda Aimer says no. Oidenu al mitzchay, while it's on his head, meratza, it works. Eno denu al mitzchay, enoi meratza, it does not work. Amr lo Rav Shimon. Now this is a bit of a tangential conversation of Rav Shimon and Rav Yehuda. Amr lo Rav Shimon. Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim yechiach. Says Rav Shimon, I'll prove to you, you don't have to wear it. Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur doesn't wear the tzitz. He doesn't wear the golden garments when he goes lifnai v'lifnim. And yet, she'ina al mitzchay is on his forehead, umeratza. And of course, it atones for Klal Yisrael. So therefore, how are you telling me that you always have to wear the tzitz? Amr lo Rav Yehuda responds, don't bring me right, Yom Kippur. Shetoma hodra b'tzibur. Because I hold Tuma is hodra b'tzibur, and therefore on Yom Kippur it's going to work, even though he's not wearing it. You don't need the tzitz at all. Tuma hodra b'tzibur means when someone is in the state of Tuma, it's a mutter gomer, and we don't need the tzitz at all. It's irrelevant. Mechlal says the Gemara, and just to point out, and not to get confusing, but how do we understand it? He said, I just said we don't need to have the tzitz. That's going to be for a carbon yachid. That's going to be the difference over here, which is not our discussion. That's going to be for a carbon yachid. Rav Yehuda is going to agree. It's going to be totally whether Kohen Gadol is wearing the tzitz or not. We're figuring out with regard to carbonis tzibur. So again, the important point is that Rav Shimon holds Tuma is the chuyahu b'tzibur, and therefore you don't need the tzitz at all. Says Gemara, what I just said, Mechal Rav Shimon Savar. Toma dechuyehi betzibur. Toma is dachi betzibur. That is din number one. Udukuliyama ina tizmarata. I'm sorry, that's din number one. Din number one, Rav Shimon, which is everyone. Toma dechuya betzibur. Take home point. The effect of that din is what? You do, yes, need the tzitz. That it's all totally in the tzitz. Number two, udukuli alma, or number three, if you want to take the fact you need the tzitz as a separate din, udukuli alma ina tzitz miratze ala chilois, that the tzitz is not miratze on the eating portion of the carbon. Meaning, the tzitz is miratze that the carbon works, but not necessarily that you're going to be allowed to eat the carbon. Why? Where do we see this? The legatana the shams like the amar. There's no one that holds that tzitz maratza lachilois. El Rav Elazar. The Tanya Rav Elazar Omer tzitz maratza lachilois. Rav Yesi Omeina tzitz maratza lachilois. And therefore, we're assuming the Rav Yesi is the popular opinion, and therefore the tzitz does not work. So now we have we'll call it a three-step process. Number one, tuma is the chuya, which means it's not mutter gomer, but it means it pushes away the tuma, and you can do the avodah. The base of that is because there is a tzitz to effect the kapara, and then off of that we see, but it does not allow you to eat the carbon. Based on this three-stage premise, we'll call it Neima Masnisa D'Laik Rav Yeshua. Now we're going to prove that the Mishnah cannot fit with Rav Yeshua. We're going to have a lengthy brisa that's going to go all the way into halfway through Amud Beis, showing us the shita of Rav Yehuda, and then we're going to swing it back around and tie it together with everything we just said and prove that the Mishnah cannot be Rav Yeshua. The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Here it goes. Abasar Adam. That's a pasuk. Rav Yeshua Imer. Emein dam, ein basar. Emein basar, ein dam. Says Rav Yeshua, din number one, the only time you're going to do dam, what does it mean you're going to do dam? You're going to do the zrika, is when you have basar. Meaning that the basar is not tameh. If the basar is tameh, you cannot do the zrika as dam. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, and he says, "Aimer dam aval b'shein basar." Even if you don't have the flesh, even if it's tameh, you still can do the zrika shnemar. V'dam zivachecha yishbayich. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer learns from the dam, it's a separate din of doing this zrika of the dam, even when the carbon is tameh. Says Rabbi Eliezer, what do I do with the first pasuk? They have to do your, I'm sorry if I didn't speak out, it's according to Rabbi Yeshua, it's because there's basar and dam right next door to each other, therefore it's only when you have basar, you have dam, if you have no basar, you have no dam. But says Rabbi Eliezer, what do I do with Rabbi Yeshua's pasuk? Says Rabbi Eliezer, you know what it teaches me? A different din. Ma dam bizrika, a basar bizrika. zrika. There's a din zrika to throw the carbon on. I think we've seen this once. There was a little cavity, a little gap. The ramp did not go all the way up to the mizbech. There was a little space in between, and you had to throw the carbon onto the mizbech. Rav Eliezer learns that out from the fact that there's an equation between dam and basar. Just like dam has to be zayrik, the basar as well has to be zayrik. But Rav Eliezer does not hold that the dam has anything to do with the basar being kosher. Even when the basar is tamei, you're still allowed to do the zrika. Rabbi Yeshua, it's going to be a classic back and forth. So let's try to hold on tight. Rabbi Yeshua, what does Rabbi Yeshua do for that din? Which Rabbi Eliezer just taught me, teaches me what? Teaches me that the carbon, there's a din zrika onto itself without the basar. Our Melacha says, Rabbi Yeshua, ksiv gabei, it says bayit va'basar toichal, that you have to eat the basar. So therefore, what does it tell me? It tells me that the only time you're going to do this zrika is when abasar teichal, is when you're eating the flesh. That is Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. Says the Gemara, why do we need two psukim? Chad ba'oila, v'chad b'shlamim. We need two different psukim according to Rabbi Yeshua, because Rabbi Yeshua just had two different psukim teaching us the same din. Basically, Rabbi Yeshua holds one din the whole day. You only do zrika if you have kosher basar. If the basar is tamei, you don't do zrika. Rav Eliezer doesn't hold to that din. Therefore, Rav Eliezer takes each pasuk and teaches us different dinim. Rav Eliezer already taught us number one din is the din of zrika on the basar, like din of zrika on the dam. And Rav Eliezer taught us din number two is you're allowed to do the zrika even if the basar is not kosher. But according to Rav Yeshua, they learned all one din. What does Rav Yeshua need two psukim for? It says the Gemara chad ba'ila chad b'shlamim. Usricha, we need two psukim. Dikad rachmana ba'ila v'chasad ba'ila oila avamina would have thought. Why? This is similar to what we saw in Amud Aleph. Shkein kalot fully burnt up. Aval shlamim doy chamira. Emallah, you would think that maybe the shlamim is allowed to be sprinkled even if the basar is not tar. Because Rachman shlamim have amina adarabo. This is shtei achila. Shlamim has two types of eating, so that's why it's chamer. Aval oila is last shtei achila is emallah. Kamash malah, and therefore says the Gemara. That's the reason why we need to have two psukim according to Rabbi Yehoshua. According to Rabbi Eliezer, what does he now do with this extra pasuk? Basar teichal was a pasuk of Rabbi Yeshua that he put next to the zrika. It's still equating that the zrika and the basar is together. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, the zrika and the basar have nothing to do with each other, because Rabbi Eliezer allows you to zrika on the dam even when the basar is not tar. Rabbi Eliezer responds, for a different din. You're not allowed to eat the flesh until you do the zrikas adam. He says Gemara, why is the whole thing coming to teach us this din? So how do I know that the dam you're allowed to do this zrika even without the basar? According to Rabbi Eliezer, he tells you I'm sorry. But the fact that it says it first, that what? Shema Mina, Rav Eliezer learns dam avav shein basar, u'shema Mina shein basar mutar b'achila ad she'yizrika dam. So Rav Eliezer, that's the third din that Rav Eliezer learns, while Rav Yeshua keeps on learning one din. Rav Yeshua has one din. You can only do the zrika if the basar is tar. If the basar is tamei, you can't do the zrika. Rav Eliezer so far had three dinim. He learned number one, of course, you can do the zrika even without the basar. Number two, he learned there's a din of zrika on the basar. Number three, he just learned that the basar is not mutter until you do the zrika. So now the ball goes back to Rabbi Yeshua. How does he know that? And he doesn't disagree. Of course, you can't eat it until you do the zrika. Kal v'chaymer, says Rabbi Yeshua, Omai murim dechilas nayu. In the emurim when they're not there, loy ma'akvi, the lack of emurim does not parcel up your carbon. Yet kias nayu ma'akvi, when you have the emurim, you have to wait for them to eat it. Dam, says Rabbi Yeshua, tchilasei ma'akiv. When you don't have the dam, it's ma'akiv. Ki isei, when you have the dam, l'kolshkein, the ma'akiv. Therefore, that's where Rabbi Yeshua learns out from a kal v'chaymer. That's where Rabbi Yeshua learns that you can't eat the carbon until you do the zrika of the dam. For Rabbi Eliezer, balls back at Rav Eliezer. No, we still have a pasuk, even though we have the Kal V'chaymer. For Rav Yeshua, what does he say? Yeshua has the opposite opinion. No, if we could give a Josh, we give a Josh, and the pasuk Torah did not write something, even though we knew it from a Kal V'chaymer. Says the Gemara. End of discussion. Now, let's get back to our Mishnah. Hashta leimamas nisan like Rav Yeshua. Now we can prove that the Mishnah like Rav Yeshua. Why? The kivan damar binan tarti. Because since Rav Yeshua taught me that you need two things. What do you need two things? You need to have the basar tahar in order to do the zrika of the dam, and the vitzitz achila isloy meratze, and the tzitz cannot help for achila. That was what we saw in Amud Aleph. We said that Rabbi Yeshua, that we said that toma duchuya, everyone holds, and the tzitz does not help for the eating. Heichi asi bitama. How in the world could you ever bring it bitama? It's not going to work out. Again, it's a three-stage process. Number one is you need the tzitz. Why do you need the tzitz? Because toma duchuya itzal b'tzibur. Number two, the tzitz does not help for the achila. If the tzitz does not help for the achila, are you going to be able to eat this carbon? No. If you can't eat this carbon, what does Yeshua hold? You can't do the zrika. Because if Yeshua holds that the zrika is intrinsically tied to the eating of the carbon. If you can't do the zrika, then how are you bringing the carbon? We're back to square one. Our whole Mishnah has a kasha. We learned the whole Mishnah was what? There's a concept that when the oilam is tameh, you're allowed to bring the carbon. And according to Yeshua, it never works. You're never going to be allowed to do the zrika of that carbon. Heichi asi bitama. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua, I can tell you it's even Rabbi Yeshua. Elikus of Rabbi Yeshua, it sits meratze al Rabbi Yeshua holds not only is it sits meratze on the carbon itself, but the tzitz is meratze more. We'll say there's going to be three stages. This is stage number two. The tzitz is even meratze on the emurim, and therefore we think right now that will by default allow us to eat the carbon, allow us to do the zrika of the carbon. Says Gemara, 1 second. Not every carbon has a murim, the murim with the limbs. By a zvachim, by an animal, the shlamim it does. The Mishnah had 5 cases, right? Was a carbon mincha. What are you going to say over there? It's not a carbon oila, meaning it's not a carbon shlamim. It's not an animal at all. It's a mincha. If it's a mincha, so what's going on? We're back to square number 1. That when it's not tar, you're not going to be able to do the zrika. Therefore, you're not going to be able to do anything. Says the Gemara, Amri ki Amar Rav Yeshua nami debina antarti bizvachin umenacha bizvachim. When did Rav Yeshua's whole din start? That you only have a zrika when you have a kosher, a basar, it's by the zvachim. Umenacha is amar. When it came to carbon mincha flour, his whole din doesn't start. Says the Gemara, really? Come on. Umenacha is amar. But tonight, I'm in the mission it mushireha of dushiraya. You lost part of the common or come tamei. Kimidas of Eliezer Kshira, according to the opinion. Kimidas means according to opinion. Lishitas. According to Eliezer, it's kasha. Kimidas of Yeshua psula. And that we so says the Gemara. Kimidas of Yeshua psula. And this is referring to even a carbon mincha. So you can't tell me that by carbon mincha Rav Yeshua's din doesn't apply. We refer to Mishnah teaches me that it does apply by carbon mincha. Says the Gemara. Kimidas, v'loy kimidas, middle level. Kimidas Rav Yeshua that what to be an entirety. That you need to have this. You need to have both this rika and the item that you're burning. Like Rav Yeshua, why? Rav Yeshua himself learned bizvachim amar b'menachas loyam. Ve'ilu haitana, this Mishnah, savar afilu b'menachas, meaning he's taking Rav Yeshua and applying it more than Rav Yeshua. He's taking the concept of Rav Yeshua, the only way to do the zrika when the carbon is tahar, and he's applying it the case Rav Yeshua never dreamt of to a carbon mincha. Umanu, says the Gemara, 1 minute. Who's this Tana? We don't know who this is. You're making things up. There is no such Tana that holds like Rav Yeshua and even more than him. Question number 1. Question number 2. We learned in a Brisa. I hold like Rav Eliezer by menachas and zvachim. V'diver Rav Yeshua when b'zvachim u'menachas. So we see clearly that Rav Yeshua's din applied even to a mincha. So now we're back to square one. Carbon mincha, we have Rav Yeshua's din. What's Rav Yeshua's din? Then you can't do the zrika unless you have a kosher carbon. If you don't have a kosher carbon, you can't do the zrika, so nothing's going to help. So how's the Omer and the Shtei Alechem, the Mishnah, going to be able to be brought to B'tama? So now we just finish off this brisa. Div Rav Eliezer, that was b'zvachim. That what does that mean? Shay Omer dam av b'shein shambasar. That there's blood, you do this zrika without the flesh. To Rav Yeshua b'zvachim, Shay Omer main dam, ein basar. Main basar, ein dam. You can do the kmitz even though you don't have the rest of the carbon. And so what do we see clearly? But we see that Rav Yeshua's din applies to a carbon mincha. So we're back to our square number 1 question. If Toma is the chuya ezel tzibur, and therefore you need the tzitz meratze, and the tzitz is not meratze on the achila, and if you don't have achila, you don't have zrik according to Rav Yeshua. How could you bring a carbon aimer, carbon shtei alechem, when everyone is Tame. Says the Gemara, Elokas of Rav Yeshua, tzitz meratza. Really, Rav Yeshua holds that tzitz is meratza al ha'oilin ve'al achilois. He goes even further now, stage number 3, that the tzitz even works for achilois. And now everything's going to be gavaldik, because if tzitz is meratza al achilois, now Rav Yeshua is going to allow you to do this zrika, because now you're going to even be able to eat it. Therefore, everything is good and dandy. Says the Gemara, one second, but that previous brisa we just quoted as an issue. Why did the brisa say, according to Rav Yeshua, it's possible? It's not possible, because if you just said he can even eat it. Says it's going if you don't have the item left anymore. You lost it or it got burnt. But if it was around and it's just tameh, then you would be allowed to eat it. Ela nitma, laman katani, the Rav Eliezer. Pshita, says the Gemara. Elenitma. Who's that going according to? Rav Eliezer. Pshita, the Gemara now explains. Hashta yesh loimer of if it's sarf. If it's lost or burnt. Dilesnayu, machshir Rav Eliezer. That when it's not around at all, this item is burnt, destroyed, we don't have it. And Rav Eliezer says it's kosher. Nitma, when it got tameh, the isa, when it is around me, boy, do we have to say that did in that brisa? So from that brisa, we're proving that it sounds very difficult to say that Rabbi Yeshua is going to allow the tzitz to be marat even on the achila. Elubshita, what are you going to have to tell me? The Rabbi Yeshua, vikatani psula, meaning you can't eat it. So we see the tzitz is marat, not marat on the achila. Void in question number 2. Tani we learned in the brisa, Rabbi Yeshua, Imer calls v'achan shebatayra. Bein shenitma basar v'chaylev kayim. Bein shenitma chaylev v'basar kayim. Whether the flesh is around or whether the fat is around. Zoyrik es adam. We do this rika. Aval nitmu tarvayu loy. So what do we see? Alma kasav Rabbi Yeshua. Einat tzitz marat al oilin v'loy al achilois. Sucker punch. Now not only do we destroy the achilas, even the oilin are no longer the tzitz maratze. So now we're in a big quandary. How we learn in the Mishnah according to Rabbi Yeshua? Elaloilam Rabbi Yeshua. Really masnisan. Really the Mishnah could be Rabbi Yeshua. V'loy kasha. Kan lechatchila. Kan b'diavad. Lichatchila. Shigol kapel teret. Lichatchila. That's the whole sigga, the whole complicated Gemara. B'diavad it all works. Ki amar Rabbi Yeshua lichatchila. Diavad loy. He didn't say he didn't do diavad. Rubenah tamer. The Shana Rabbi Yeshua lichatchila diavad. The Tani learned to the right, and it's also let's claim. Realize army Yisrik, you can do this week. If Shomar la Yisrik, like we keep on saying the whole day, we sure say you can't do this week because the basar is tummy. But Umay de Rav Yeshua Shim Zayrek Har Hurtza, it's going to work. That's what we're going to pause for today, even though we're smack in the middle of a massive, massive Shakavitaria, and we'll finish on Sunday.